Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to the regular council meeting of September 17, 2024. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Acting Mayor Caprero is not able to be with us today, so I'll be chairing this meeting. So the first item on the agenda is to adopt the agenda for the September 17th, 2024 regular council meeting. Are there any discussions on that? Yes, Councillor Chappelle.
I will so move the agenda as presented for today's meeting.
Second? No seconds. Okay, any discussion on that? Then I'd like to bring this to a vote. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. And we have no delegations today. And the next item is the adoption of the previous minutes. Do we have any comments or questions regarding the previous minutes from September the 3rd, 2024?
If there is no discussion, I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes of September 3rd, 2024 as presented.
Maybe that one needs to go over there. Any discussion on that? No, so I'm going to call it to a vote. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. New business. The first item is Energy Systems franchise fees. Ms. Quinlan, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor and Council. So the first agenda item that I've got is the ATCO franchise fees for 2025. This is an item we bring forward every year. Both ATCO and Fortis send us notification, usually in August, that we need to renew our franchise fees and provide councils with an opportunity to change the rates if they so choose. So we've had a franchise fee agreement with them for many years. You can go up to 35%, and typically, well, in the past, we've used the rate of 30% for the delivery tariff. And it's been this way since 2015. So last year we had 2.3 million was what they estimated their delivery revenue was forecasted at, which translated into providing us with $694,000 in franchise fees. They always provide us with a forecast for the coming year, and they're forecasting 2.419 million, which will provide us with 725. My apologies, there is a typo that should say this shows an increase rather than decrease in the overall revenue. So we will see an extra $31,809 in franchise fees. 1% increase, if you were considering wanting to do an increase or decrease, translates into $24,194. So, and I do have a little paragraph in there about how the revenues, they do fluctuate because the franchise fee is calculated off of people's consumption. So if people start, especially in this sort of era, if people start being really economical in terms of their use of gas and or electricity, you could potentially see a decrease in the franchise fees if they lower their consumption. There's a lot of factors that contribute to gas consumption. A lot of it is weather dependent. So if it's a really cold winter, you're going to see increases versus a mild winter. Is there any questions?
If I could, Deputy Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Chappelle.
How close are the estimates in previous years? Are they out to lunch or are they fairly close?
They're usually pretty close. I don't have those numbers right in front of me, but they usually come in fairly close. I mean, the only thing that would sway it would be if we had a really unusual winter, but, yeah.
So how do we budget that in then? If it's not a concrete number and there's a risk of maybe, in this case, there's a $30,000 difference from what last year was at and this year's estimate. So how do we budget around that? If we don't have a concrete number, do we just sort of guess and take a lower number, or do we use the number that they give us?
No, we always use the number that they provide. So, I mean, I think they spend a lot of time coming up with these forecasts. They've probably got a fairly complex system for deriving what their revenue is gonna be. So we always use that number. It's never been like hugely different, like it could vary, and I can look it up and let you guys know, but, you know, a couple thousand maybe, but it's usually fairly close.
Thank you. Are there any other questions regarding the ATCO franchise fees? I have one. Is there any reason why you haven't recommended an increase?
I mean, I think that's a council decision. They didn't send me a listing. Fortis always sends us a listing of sort of where other municipalities are. I mean, we've run with 30% for quite a while, so
Okay, thank you. Yes, Councillor Schultz.
Looks like if there's no further discussion, I was gonna make a motion. I was gonna make a motion that council approve the 2025 ATCO Gas and Pipelines Limited franchise fee at the existing rate of 30%.
Councillor Hutchinson.
Thank you. I just a bit of a concern that we haven't raised it since 2015. Is there any appetite for this council to raise it by a point or two, which would, the franchise fees generate revenue from a lot of our nonprofits and the places that don't pay property tax. So if we can, spread it out over the year, a couple of percentage on this franchise fees, and hopefully be able to not increase the taxes as much or have this offset that a little bit.
Councillor Auld.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just Councillor Hutchinson, I'm not really in favor of that. As Betty indicated, she said it would only be a couple $1,000s if we went up or down a percentage. We're definitely not at the cap of where we could be, but at the end of the day, it still comes out from our residents as a cost. So I'm not on board with raising it up. I know we haven't changed it in quite a few years, but I think that's a good thing, and we've been able to make it work with that.
Councillor Chappelle.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm where Councillor Hutchinson's at. Taxations for taxable properties, and there's many untaxable properties in town, provincial buildings or things that are nonprofit organizations. And one way we can get revenue from them is through this means. And so we can gain taxation by adding this to the power bill, and then that would decrease taxes for the Joe public out there, for the residential users. So this is a roundabout way of getting revenues from non-taxable properties long term. So yes, it'll cost everybody, but it'll cost the people who don't pay taxes to begin with. So rather than the general population paying more taxes, I think this is a way of doing it. So I'm in favor of looking at a couple percentage points increase in this. Now, the unfortunate part is that we don't have comparables to other communities where they're at. And it may be worth our time to stall this decision till the next council meeting and get a list of what other communities are at. Because if we're at the top of the pile, then maybe we don't do that. But if we're not at the top, then I think it's worthy to look at.
Thank you. Councillor Phillips?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, I was looking further down on our agenda, at the next agenda item, we're talking about the Fortis franchise fee. That's where I was gonna potentially look at having a more wholesome discussion, because this one, we are at the upper limit of where we can be, whereas the other one, we are not. To me, if we're looking at doing this, it would make more sense in the Fortis as opposed to the ATCO. I'm not sure why I'm having an echo here today, but we are.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Any other, oh yes, Councillor Hutchinson.
Thank you. Do you have a quickie math calculation on what to say a 2%
Well-
increase would be?
Right now, a 1% increase in taxes will generate $97,000. So looking at these two, ATCO, a 1% increase will generate 24,000, and a 1% increase in Fortis will generate 61,000. So a 1% increase for both of them would, well, it's not quite 1%, but it would almost cover a 1% tax increase.
Yes.
Thank you. I like that idea of, it's not a lot, but I would also be in favor of postponing until we had more information, if that's the way council would like to go. Because we do have time. Is it November? It has to be,
I think it's October 15th.
oh,
So we do have time. I did contact ATCO and ask them for some background information. I have not received it yet. But absolutely, it is another means to generate income for the town. And really what they're paying is the right to use our land to run their, so it's not a rental fee, but it's similar to a rental fee. So they are paying for a service.
Anyone else have any questions or comments? Councillor Chappelle.
Deputy Mayor, if I could, to Councillor Phillips, I think my request would be is if we don't pass the motion today, that you put it on hold and we get information as to what other communities are paying, and just see where we're at in that down the road. Just a suggestion.
Thank you. Ms. Quinlan, that information is readily available?
I'll contact them again and see if I can hurry it up, but it should be.
Okay, thank you.
Then, yeah, with the additional discussion, then I would be rescinding my motion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hutchinson.
thank you. Excuse me, would we need then an additional motion? I'll make a motion. Be it resolved that council asks administration to bring back more information about ATCO Gas and Pipelines Limited franchise fee request for decision to a future council meeting.
And are there any discussions on that motion? If there are none, I'm going to call it to a vote. All in favor? Any opposed? No, that's carried. The next item is the Fortis franchise fees. Ms. Quinlan.
Right, thank you. So again, similar thing, only this is for electricity. We did increase the rate slightly, it was 2 years ago, to 15.3, and actually the strategy was very similar in that we raised it, I believe it was by about 2%, to offset the potential increase in taxes. So right now, the forecast for last year was for 898,000, and this year their distribution and transmission revenue is projected to be just over 7 million, which will provide us with 934, almost 935,000, which is an increase in $36,000. So again, I've given you the percentage increase, a 1% increase in a Fortis fee would generate 61,000, and it would cost a customer $9.73 per month, for a total of $158.56. So you may, I mean, have the discussion, but you may want to look at a similar idea to this as to the ATCO.
Okay, thank you. Would anybody like to comment or have a question for Ms. Quinlan? Councillor Hutchinson.
Thank you. There is a list included of comparable municipalities. And I believe you had somewhere on there between 10 and 18% or 20% is what's,
Yeah, it ranges from 10 to 18 on the big list. They give us a list of every municipality. There's a little table in the RFD that talks about, I go through, not every town uses Fortis, so not all of our comparator towns are in there, but on the page 5 of 6, you can see like Coaldale's at 18. So the only one that's lower than us is Wainwright. And Drayton Valley. Drayton sometimes is a little unusual. I don't know if it's because of the gas that they've got. Sometimes their tax rates and things are a little different than other municipalities. But it looks like a lot of them are between 16 and 18%.
Thank you. Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So looking at Fortis and ATCO, I think this is a discussion we have to have both of them at the same time. I don't think we should have one and then delay one for 2 weeks. So to me, if we're gonna delay one, we should delay the other so we can have a wholesome discussion with both. But again, my comment from the last agenda item that we were talking about, if we're looking at one of the two, this is the one that I would sooner look at if we're thinking about doing an increase, because this is the one where I think we can. But again, I think they should both be together. They shouldn't be separated.
Thank you.
In fact, if there's no further discussion, I will make that motion that we bring the Fortis franchise fees discussion to a future council meeting.
Councillor Hutchinson.
thank you. Are we looking for any additional information, or is what's been provided sufficient?
To me, what's provided here is sufficient for me for this one.
Any other questions or comments? Then I'm going to call it to a vote. All in favor? And that's carried. Um, 7.3 budget assumptions. Ms. Quinlan.
Thank you. So it's that time of year again. We've started working on the budget, but one of the first things that we like to do is come to council, really just to get sort of some direction in terms of some of the major assumptions that we use when we're developing the budget. The big issues, and I kind of created a table. We're looking at, our cost of living, property tax increases or potential increases, transfers to capital, user fees. Some of these things will be discussed further at service level. If there's any changes in service delivery, potential staffing requests, I think that will be discussed at service level. And then the last one is, if we can't balance the budget, again, and this would probably be at service level, what things do you want to see us, what do you want us to do in order to balance it? Is there a sequence in terms of cutting services or what's the process? So we've started looking at the budget. The first thing is the cost of living, so I monitor that, I actually monitor it all year. Right now, we do have policies, we've done a lot of work in the policies to set a lot of these assumptions, so it takes some of the unknown and the pressure off. But right now, we're using a 5-year rolling average for the cost of living increases. When I prepared this, the June data was the only data available, and it was at 3.82. I suspect, well, I read this morning it's gone down. So if that goes down by a 1 percentage point into the rolling average, it'll change it by 0.2. So I think this will drop slightly as we move into the budget. But right now, the cost of living is sitting at, let's say, 3.62. So that is what we've determined that we would use for cost of living increases for staffing. Yeah, we'll get to property taxes. Capital transfers, on the next page, I'm showing you sort of a table of where our capital transfers to capital come from. So right now we have a base of about 753,000. We have the community support grant, which is from the county. It's recognized as operating income just because it has to come in through revenue to be recognized. But we transfer those funds into capital because that's sort of their intent, is that they be spent on capital. So there's that. One of our policies does also talk about sort of a strategy to eventually try to get the transfer to capital equal to amortization, which is a sort of a standard recommendation in the accounting world. The concept behind that is that if you're replacing amortization, it's not 100% measure because your amortization could be 50 years old, but it's that you're putting enough money in to replace the infrastructure that you're trying to maintain. So every year we've kind of said, okay, we're going to increase this by 30,000. I did leave the 2024 one in there, so really it's just an increase of 30,000 this year. And just a note, it's really interesting. I'm sure you've read about the water issues that Calgary and Montreal have faced. I think that's a direct link to the infrastructure deficit that the whole, probably all of North America is facing, and kind of what the results can be if you start having failures of that nature. So it's something that we don't see very often, but I think when you do see it, I think it can have big consequences. The interest, and it's just an estimate at this time, we've been really fortunate in the last couple of years with the interest rates going up, as well as that we've got good balances in our reserves. We're able to transfer, I mean, it's been $1.5 million this year, and it's probably going to be over that budget, as well as next year. I think I looked at 20 million at a sort of standard interest rate. So we are able to put significant dollars into our reserves, which is almost getting us, so the total for this year is 2.5 million. Amortization is running at 3.7 million, and that's using old construction costs to come up with that amortization. So it looks like a lot of money, but in reality, if we started having to replace significant water and sewer lines are the biggest concern. If we had to, and roads, if we had to start replacing significant amounts of those, that money would run out really quickly, because I don't even know what a block of that would be these days. At least $1 million, if not more. So one block is $1 million. So, you know, $10 million would do 10 blocks, which if you've got issues with your lines isn't a lot. But so that's the capital transfers. Property tax rates, and I did go through and I looked up the 2024 tax rates. They're available, oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. Counselor Hutchinson.
Just back to the capital transfers. So our interest rate, of course, fluctuates depending on which year it is. Does the interest have to, I know it's a wise move to keep it in capital reserves, but can that be used for operating if that was a place that we needed to? Or would that just not be a wise move?
Yeah, it can be. I would suggest not, I mean, the whole budget is really a balancing act, right? So you could use interest if you so choose. I wouldn't suggest using a lot of interest. I have had prior experience where we just left the interest in the budget and had a big downturn in the interest rates, and all of a sudden I was looking for, $250,000, and it was like, oh, okay, this wasn't a really good idea. So you could use a portion of it. I would suggest a smaller portion that, you're always gonna have, like it's not gonna disappear if you were really struggling to balance the budget. So absolutely you could.
Thank you.
So the next one is the property tax rates. So I've gone through and looked up all of the 2024 rates. Last year was really interesting, and I did try to extract it, but I wasn't able to. There was large increases in assessment across the board. It was typically higher in residential and lower in commercial. But what I was really looking at was, have we sort of achieved our one of our goals, and that was to try to sort of have a bit more parity with other communities. I do want to caution, because we all want to be at the average, but every community does have differences in their service delivery, and that is going to be reflected in your rates. So to be exactly at the average might actually be doing us a disservice, because, and I'll use protective services, if we pay a little bit more for protective services and then go to the average tax rate, what's going to happen is then we're providing less service someplace else, which, in my mind could be, I know operations tends to run a little bit lower. I'm not sure why. So you want to be close, but it doesn't have to be bang on, I guess is what I'm saying. But you can see that we're getting really close. The average is 7.7 and we're at 8.6. So we're within one point. And I've used the weighted average for the non-residential rates, just because we want to be comparable. And we're certainly getting closer. The next little table shows the difference. So we're 0.96 over on the residential and 1.09 under on the non-residential. The other thing that does factor into this, and I haven't got into a lot of calculations, but the ratio of assessment also impacts your tax rates. If there's a community that has huge commercial, they're gonna be able to collect more money, so it impacts your ratios and your rates. But if you look at ours, our residential is slightly lower than the average, whereas the non-res is slightly higher. Questions on this?
Counselor Hutchinson.
Thank you. Have you done a comparable on, like, we've got two rates for our non-residential? Is that common? I know we've talked about trying to bridge that
Yeah.
gap. Is this something that we should be looking further into to bridge that
Don't
gap?
know, there's not a lot of municipalities that do the two rates. I'm not sure if the CAO knows. Like, it's more common to have one. I know that. I mean, some of the logic behind having the larger rates for larger commercial actually makes sense, because a lot of them are are national companies that, you know, have way more buying power than, say, a smaller place. One of the issues that I've dealt with when I've looked at these rates is if we were to try to bring the small business up to the large rate, it would be huge increases. I mean, we were looking at like 18% increase. So I don't think it's possible to do it in one swoop, but you could absolutely change, you can change all three of those rates by different amounts to achieve an end goal. So,
Thank you. Anyone else? Questions, comments?
so looking at the tax rates, preliminary budget estimates, which means I've just rolled the budget into 2025, like we had done projections last year, we've got the 5-year projection. So we take the 5-year projection, I apply cost of living increases, good or bad, I've put the franchise fees in there, so those increases are calculated. And right now, we're looking for about $400,000. So to balance the budget. So that would translate into a 4.2% increase, which I think would be high. So we need to look other places. I also know that some of the directors have indicated that, you know, there are gonna be expenditure increases. I know operations is looking at some of their costs and saying we need to do more work in certain areas. So this is before we've even really reviewed the budgets and addressed any increases or decreases that may be occurring. But it gives you a bit of a yardstick as to, okay, what are we looking at, and you know, what are you comfortable with in terms of a potential tax increase? And then the next page is, we talk about franchise fees, which we've already covered. And then I did a table last year, and I've included it in this year, of rates and user fees and rentals. So a 1% increase on all the user fees would be about $13,000. The one that I would caution us on is under general, the rentals and leases. A lot of those are leases, like their airport hangar leases, the medical center lease. They're leases that we can't just say, oh, we're gonna increase them. So those are a little harder to adjust. If we just look at recreation, that's the sales and rentals. So those are the user fees that are paid on a daily basis. So really 1% would probably get you about $8,500. So those are the assumptions and the information basically that we look at every year. I guess what I'm looking for is any feedback from council as to where their comfort levels lie. It doesn't have to be sort of written in stone, but just giving me some direction, as for me, administration, some direction as to where we want to go in this year's budget.
Councillor Chappelle?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So, a couple questions. So you're talking about user fees, 1% gives us 85,000, is that the number you had?
8,500.
Or 8,500? If we went up 1% in franchise fees, which would basically be 1 mil, right? 100,000, give or take. Did you have any money coming from the interest revenue? Have you put any of that in there?
No, so
So-
I've taken 100% of the interest revenue and transferred it into capital.
Would it make sense to take a couple $100,000 of that and put into our operating budget?
You absolutely could. I don't want to say yes or no because that's a council decision, but it is an option. I don't think you want to, yeah, it is an option.
Okay. So looking at all those numbers, it looks like we're only maybe 2 to 3% of an increase from a balanced budget. And
And this is before any other changes, so if there's operating expenditure increases, staffing, if there's any staffing requests, there could potentially be, you know, and we do go through the budget, and where possible, we'll reduce costs, but we've been coming in so tight against our budget in the last couple of years.
so does it make sense to even have this discussion before we do our service level review to see what other costs would come in here? Because we may have a dream of it being 2%, but if all of a sudden there's staffing requests and or other costs coming into play, I guess my question is, are we premature in having this discussion? Because there's really a lot of room for movement down the road. So, I mean, my appetite is to say zero increase, but that's not realistic. So, I think that we need to be realistic, and we're not gonna be there until after we have our service level reviewed, my take on it. So, Mr. Kroos, I'm just looking for an opinion there.
Yeah, no, and I think what really we're looking for today is some assumptions like you have just done for Betty to proceed with developing the draft budget, because it's a huge undertaking. So if I take your comments and say, okay, this is what we're gonna do the draft budget with, because then when we present it, you can see what it looks like. So if council's in the opinion that, you know what, let's take 200,000 of our interest revenue and put that into operating. We feel that's a safe number and that we can continue it for years to come. Then Betty will start working with that. If council is looking at franchise fees, well, now Betty can work with that number to see where we end up. And that's always gonna be adjusted as we move down the path, you know, after service level. But I think, you know, what Ms. Quinlan's asking for today is, okay, how are you feeling? What do you want us to try in this initial draft budget to see what it looks like?
So to that then, I guess my earlier comments where we'd draw 200,000 out of interest revenues and take the user fees, the franchise fees at 1%, and look at what that comes up with, would be my take on it. I'm not sure where my fellow councillors are, but I think that's a good starting point, because that would look at basically 2 to 3% of a tax increase. I'd be okay with that.
Thank you, Mr. Kraus. Councillor Phillips.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. So, you know, based on the data that we have here, I think the assumption amount is right. How we fund that through, whether it's through franchise fees or interest rate or interest transfers, that's to be determined yet. My concern about using interest is it's okay now that the interest rates are, for lack of a better word, good, and we're getting income out of it. But if we rely on too much interest to run our operational side of things, in 3 years' time when the interest rates potentially crash or something drastic happens to them, we've built that into our budget. So all of a sudden, 3 years down the road, now you're gonna have a big tax increase to cover off something that isn't there anymore. But your budgets have been based on that. So that would be my only concern about using interest dollars to balance a budget, is that, yes, they're here today, but they may not be here in 2 years. So it's a roll of the dice that money's still gonna be there. But once it's in the budget, it's hard to remove it from the budget, so. But yeah, I agree that, you know, the franchise fee discussion is something that we need to have, particular on the Fortis side. But I would be very leery about using too much in the way of interest dollars, because that can come back to bite us a couple years down the road.
Thank you. Councillor Auld.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And just for clarification, you said you did include the 1% increase in ATCO and Fortis in your budget assumptions?
No, I just included the increases that they're projecting. So
Okay.
there is not a 1%
Not
increase.
an increase in there. Okay, thank you.
Just a comment, and I agree with Mr. Kraus. I think just having this conversation, without having to say something in stone, I've gotten sort of a direction that, you know, there's we're potentially looking at 3 sources. One of our goals is always to keep taxes as reasonable as possible. So looking at how we can achieve success with, the different constraints that we've got, but looking at several sources of revenue is what you're telling me. And trying to balance out all of those so that we, have as least amount of risk as possible and maximize, any opportunities that we've got. Does that make sense?
It
So I
does.
would look at
Thank
a
you.
combination of all 3.
Yeah, fellow councilors, are you comfortable with that? Then can I get a motion? Councillor Hutchinson.
I was just gonna comment that I agree with what Councillor Phillips is saying about the interest to a certain point, but because, we don't want to be reliant on that, but that increase is so big compared to what we had for, even 3 years ago on interest revenue, that I think I definitely would like to see a small portion of that, some portion of that coming out to help offset taxes for the residents.
My perspective, I agree. Go ahead, Ms. Quinlan.
One other item that I do have as a separate motion, but we also need to look at dates for budget discussions. I did pick 2 dates, but they are by no means written in stone. I looked at the 27th and 28th of November, which is a Wednesday and Thursday. We usually like to shoot for the end of November, beginning of December. So if you could look at that and determine if you've got 2 days that everybody's available.
Okay, so we have 2 motions on this presentation. And can I get somebody to provide the first motion? Yes.
If you don't want to do the motion that's recommended, I think just accepting this as information
Oh,
is
okay.
sufficient.
Councillor Spelt?
I will still make that motion that we accept this as information.
Any other discussion on that motion? Then I'll call it to a vote. All in favor? That's carried. Councillor Phillips.
And I will make the motion that council approve November 27th and 28th from 9 to 4:30 for budget meeting presentation and discussion.
Any further discussion on that motion? No, we'll call it to a vote. All in favor? Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great reports. And our next agenda item is Airport Lighting Project with Director Shanks and Mr. LaFrance. Go ahead.
Good morning, Your Honor, Deputy Mayor and Council. For the airport lighting project, we've run into some complications regarding the replacement of the LED lights along the runway and the installation of the PAPI system, replacing the existing lighting system. At a really high level, the lighting and the PAPI system allow navigation for aircraft in inclement weather and for operations during any hours, so at night. We do operate the forestry based out of the airport as well as other uses out there. This program is in conjunction with the county, who's our partner as that, as well as provincial funding provided through the STIP CAP grant. There's sort of 2 additional complications that we've sort of run into that are outlined in the decision. The larger one is the existing conduit run for the electrical out there. It was installed in such a manner that we can't pull new cables through it due to the way that the conduit is run. There's too many bends as they bend around each light in a 90-degree thing, and the original proposal for this thing was under the assumption that we would be able to reuse that conduit and the conduit was in good shape. Also, the quality of the conduit, we've noticed some areas where the conduit's collapsed because it was a softer style conduit. It's not really what I'm familiar with seeing for a lot of underground installations and whatnot, but again, it was used at that time. I believe it was installed more for protection of the wiring rather than anticipation of future running of wires. So with that, we are able to, the wiring in there is in moderate to good shape. There is some resistance drop in there, but we anticipate those being spot repairs in the future. So we are able to reuse those wires. But the installation of the stakes and whatnot, due to how the conduit is run in sort of a snaky matter, and with the 90s, we need to hydrovac all of those locations because we can't just drive things into them. So that's why there's the cost associated with them. And then the other one is the lights are on a stake and they're supposed to be a frangible coupling, because again, if the airplanes lose control or the runway's slippery or whatever, the idea is they break instead of the $1 million aircraft, which is generally a good thing. These frangible connections over the last few years have been broken multiple times through operations, maintenance, repairs, for whatever reasons. And yes, they're designed to break, but they're only designed to break so many times. So there's been some field repairs performed that maybe don't quite meet standards and whatnot over the past 20 years, 25 years or so. And so now there's a deficit of repairs required for those stakes. And the current stake design, we've also run into some operational issues with rodents, foxes, and other animals damaging them. So the updated stakes reduce a lot of those maintenance costs and whatnot. Also, it's not just the time that it takes, there's also a lead time on these items, and the way that the lights are damaged, they often require replacement of the actual lights in the circuit board, just because they don't just chew the wires, they rip and tear. It's rather unfortunate. So that's the additional concern with, if we don't do this properly, we're gonna incur a debt of just having to continually order these parts, and the repairs will get more partial. So that's what we're looking for today. So if there's any questions, I'll see what we can do.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Auld.
I'm just curious, thank you, Deputy Mayor. The grant that we received to complete this project, was it a maximum dollar set that we could apply for, and we were at that, or? did
There
we
was not a
apply-
maximum dollar value predefined. They gave us what we had requested at the time for the scope of work identified in the engineering study that assumed reusing a lot of these things. The grant is a very hard cap, so we did request more, and it was a very hard no from the province on ever requesting more as part of this funding. And so it was sort of a very hard no on asking for more or increasing that funding as part of that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions regarding this agenda item? Councillor Hutchinson?
Thank you. Because we have the agreement with the county on the 700,000 for the airport for the terminal project, does it matter if we shift money around and pull, I mean, they're gonna have to be going through the same thing as well. I guess this is more for Mr. Kraus than Mr. LaFranc, Sean. Anyways, is there any restrictions on us pulling that money, transferring out of the airport terminal building project?
No, I mean, that's council's budget, so council can transfer from one project to another. In regards to the terminal building, I mean, that's being reassessed right now. I think both the county and the town in the last ICC meeting are looking to be more cost efficient in that project. And we're doing a foundation assessment. But one part of that project for the terminal building was actually moving the electrical and FEC out of the building, which is included also in this project. So we're basically taking the funds that were in the terminal building for that portion of the project and just shifting it over to this project, which is provincially grant funded.
Thank you. It's just an unfortunate situation, right? But we really don't have an option. There's no way of proceeding with the project as it is, and it this is just the way it is, so. Any other comments? Yes, please.
I would make the motion be resolved, excuse me, that council amend the 2024 capital budget by reallocating $66,000 of the airport terminal project to the airport lighting project.
Okay, and if there is no further discussion, I'll call that to a vote. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, agenda item 7.5, the Rocky Chamber of Commerce, the community transformation proposal. Mr. Kraus, please.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. So at the last council meeting, council received a presentation from the Chamber of Commerce and Unstoppable Conversations for a Community Project Initiative. Council has asked admin to provide funding sources for that because they're looking for $10,837 from the municipality for this project. So this is being presented to council. Council has a couple options here. To be funded from council's current budget, because it looks like there might be room by year end for that. Or just to take the money from the council priority reserve. So that is council's decision. So you might want to restrain yourself on your training budget to make sure you're under budget. So the simplest solution would probably be taking it from the reserve.
That's your recommendation?
Sure, yes.
Okay. I guess the first question I have for my council peers is this something we're interested in participating in? Councilor Rowland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think, high level, I think this is it's always a good initiative to have members of our community get together, get them involved, get them engaged in something like this. My reservation is that this has been done before. It was not facilitated, but it was, a group was created, Ignite Rocky Mountain House, and right off the bat, everybody was interested and engaged, and a year down the road, it fizzled out to nothing. It dissolved and went by the wayside. I'm just hesitant on supplying the funds with that background. I don't see how this is going to be a whole much different from that presentation. It's still going to really rely on community support, and the ball goes in their court. They talk about the 2 4-week or 8-week sessions after the fact where they Zoom meeting and try and keep people on track. I'm not sold on the whole process with this. So I'm looking to my fellow councillors to help me make a decision on this one.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your honesty. Councillor Phillips.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. So to Councillor Ald's comments, I remember the Ignite Rocky initiative, and that was a private business, private citizen run initiative. It really didn't have a lot in the way of council involvement, and I don't remember how much Chamber of Commerce had involvement it had, but I don't anticipate that it was a ton. The difference I see between that and this is not just Rocky Council or Clearwater Council or Chamber or private citizens, it's everybody. And I think because it is everybody, this I think it deserves a chance, simply because it does involve council, chamber, business, private citizens. It may, other forms may not have worked in the past, but this isn't the same form that was used in the past. So I would like to see it at least tried, because if we don't try, we know what the result's going to be. I would like to at least try something and see if we can change the narrative of negativity to positivity, and changing that narrative will inherently increase the thoughts of and minds of the residents of Rocky Mountain House, and be able to spin that narrative to positive, and that will create bonuses in the future. So that's my thing, is that this is a community-run project as opposed to just council or just chamber or just individuals.
Thank you. I was not part of the Ignite thing at the time. If I recall, the letter we received from the chamber had signatories, over 100 of them, businesses. I don't have it with me, but correct me if I'm wrong, but businesses in support of this Unstoppable Conversations endeavor, which is that's significant, right? So I agree. I would like to proceed with this, and maybe clear the air a bit. It's just an opportunity to get together, and it's not run by council, right? It's we're just participants, and so we're all on equal ground. And this is just something that really has resonated with me. That's just my opinion. Anyone else have any comments, questions regarding this? Councillor Hutchinson?
Thank you. Can you guys remember when they were talking timeline? I know it was the 2-day workshop and then 8 to 12 weeks after that, but did they give us any kind of
I
timeline?
believe they wanted to do this October, November-ish, somewhere in that time frame for the 2 days.
Ms. Breeze, do you have any of that information available?
So Deputy Mayor, during their presentation, I think that's what they presented, was October or November to get this initiative off the ground. I think they commented initially going in the new year, but they felt it was more important to get it going now. So I think October and November was the dates they presented.
Okay, so there weren't any dates that they actually attached to that? They
No.
just suggested this fall?
Yes.
Okay, before winter. I see. Okay, thank you. Councillor Chappelle?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Have we heard if the county is participating? And if we haven't, then we should probably, if we do go forward with the motion, we should probably make a contingent on the county being involved as well.
Mr. Kroos?
I believe it's going to their next council meeting. I would suggest to council and advise council not to make it contingent on the county. And just my justification for that, or reason behind that, is you're almost trying, it appears you're cornering the county. So this project is now contingent on them saying, yes, we're in, but only if you are, type of thing. So I think if council thinks this is a valuable project, that the town commit the money, and then if the county decides not to, well, then the chamber will have to figure out the other $10,000. So I think, just in fairness to our partners, is that we don't want to put them in a position where they feel it's all up to them versus a partnership.
Thank you, Mr. Kroos. I feel the same way. If it is important, and we see the value in it, I would like to participate without any provisos. Any other comments or questions? If there are none, can I get a motion? Go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that council approve funding of the $10,837.50 for the Rocky Chamber Initiative to be funded from council priority reserve.
Thank you. Councillor Hutchinson?
Yeah, just questioning that, out of the council priority reserve or the training budget. I think I would prefer it out of the training budget.
Can I ask why?
Just because we don't know what else might come up within
Okay.
this budget cycle, and the training budget should be, I mean, we are down to 6 council members, and I believe we're on the low end, not the low end, some of us are on the higher end, but some of us are on the lower end of the training budget, so I think there would be money available. Maybe we could ask, again, Mr. Kraus, was it the training budget or the reserves that you were recommending? Or did you recommend?
Well, I put forward a recommendation out of reserves, just because I'm not sure what council will do in the next 3 months for training opportunities or stuff like that. So, I mean, if council looks to exceed that budget, then we'd have to come back and adjust that budget by adding funds back into it. So, just for simplicity's sake, I think it would go to the reserve, come from the reserve.
Go ahead.
Okay, having said that, I had it the other way around, thinking in a different direction, so I'm fine.
So the motion stands with prior council priority reserve. Okay, any other questions or comments? If there are none, I'll call it to a vote. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Next, 7.6, notice of motion from Councillor Auld on the Frisbee golf locations. Councillor Auld?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, as member of council, but also a resident of Rocky, I love seeing activities in town that we can provide to our residents, have family friendly, and still be able to do it at a very minimal cost, but still have just different activities that are available to our residents. So I spent a little time doing some research on different locations. We went out to Nordig, they just installed a new one out there. It was lined up with people. There was lots of visitors out there. I just think it's something that I would like to see the town see if we can put into a budget. I know it's not going to be a large expense, but the difficulty might be finding the proper location to put it to. So I just want to bring that forward to council and see if there was any appetite for my motion, which would be resolved that council instruct administration to investigate feasible locations and costs to install Frisbee golf and bring a report back to council.
Would anybody like to comment or have a question for Councillor Auld regarding his motion? Councillor Phillips?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, I think investigating this is a good idea. Anytime we can get any type of recreational activities for the public to do, and this one seems like it should be a relatively inexpensive thing to accomplish, providing we can find land. I agree that, investigating it to see what it could look like, I think we should definitely do that.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? I agree too. Can I get a motion? That was the motion. Then let's, if there is no further discussion, I'll call that to a vote. All in favor? And that's carried. And then we move into agenda item 8, correspondence for action. 8.1, the community grant application from the West Country Family Services Association. Ms. Breeze or Mr. Kraus?
Sorry. Thank you, Deputy Mayor and Council. So you have before you a grant application, very typical of the ones we've been seeing. So this is a barn dance, and it's being held at Rival Trade. They're expecting about 140 participants for this. Sales have actually been going pretty good because I've seen their advertisement on Facebook. So the decision is before council. It is a community They are expecting a lot of the community to attend, so it is open to the community. But again, it is being held at Rival Trade as well.
Thank you very much. Comments, questions regarding this application? Councillor Hutchinson.
We all know that our grant policy is coming back for service level because we have some gray areas in there, such as there's been other grants that we didn't accept because they're a ticketed event, as this one is a ticketed event as well. And the other fact that it is not within the town limits. So as much as I feel that it's definitely a worthwhile cause, I struggle because there's some events that we didn't provide the grant to for those two reasons. So I would, I guess, ask for more conversation on council as to whether or not it's something that we feel, based on those two items, is it something that we feel is worth awarding the grant to?
Councillor Chappelle.
Deputy Mayor, thank you. Maybe just refresh my memory. I can't recall where we haven't funded organizations from out of town that were ticketed, so maybe just bring me up to speed on that one.
Ms. Breeze.
Through to Councillor Shibboldt. So, one application that was not approved was the Farrier, but that was not a ticketed event. The other one was the sponsorship for the, I'm gonna say this wrong, 1799 event.
Yes.
So that was done as a sponsorship instead of a grant, possibly because of the location. I'm not sure what council's final decision was on, but that would be another example of a ticketed event.
Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, I mean, we obviously haven't had the discussion about our granting policy, whether we do or don't add certain items or criteria into it. So obviously the request today has to be on its own merits. West Country Family Services does a multitude of great things for our community. Yes, the event isn't in Rocky Mountain House itself. However, there have been a lot of events held at Rival Trade that I'm not sure if we funded any of those at all. I'm seeing a no over there. But I get that it's not in town limits, but to me, that's still part of our community. So I would like to see this go ahead and be approved, but keeping in mind that we are going to be reviewing our grant policy here in the near future.
Councillor Auld.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I agree with Councillor Phillips. It may not be in town, but it is definitely benefiting our local residents in town. They're based out of town. Whether that is their only option for a venue, maybe, maybe not, but we definitely have supported ticketed events, whether it's RASA, the Chucks. So I'm comfortable with the way our policy reads right now, and we will be bringing it back, but I'm okay with the way this one is.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Hutchinson.
There is money left in that grant fund. Excuse me.
Yes, there is. I believe it sits about half of the funds have been used, because we've had one actual grant application check returned.
Oh, thank you. I'm in favor of this because we're using the policy as it exists. And we've made a commitment to review it at service review because of these sorts of things, right? There's just some inconsistencies, some gray areas, some lack of clarity, and I'm hoping we're able to do that. But based on the policy now, West Country Family Services is based in Rocky Mountain House. the venue they're holding this at, the one they've chosen, is not within town limits. That's why I would vote to support this, just simply because we have to use the policy that's in place. Councillor Ault.
If there's no other questions, I'd just make a motion that,
Oh, just a minute.
sorry.
Sorry, Councillor Hutchinson.
I was just going to make the comments that you did, Deputy Mayor. Is that what you are?
Yes.
Yes, sorry.
Yes, yes.
Make the same comments, although I struggle because our grant policy isn't black and white. We've got some gray areas in there. And I'm looking forward to having that community grant policy reviewed at service level so that we won't be having some we're giving, some we're not giving, and having this discussion. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Auld?
sorry about that, Councillor Hutchinson.
No, it's my fault.
So I'd make the motion that we approve the West Country Family Services Project Country Dance fundraiser and supply them with the grant requested.
Okay, thank you. If there is no further discussion, I'll call that to a vote. All in favor? And that's carried. Item 8.2, Parkland Regional Library. We have a letter from the library director. Would anybody like to address this? Mr. Kraus?
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. So Parkland Regional Library System is asking council if they would like a presentation or a delegation from them just to promote and offer information on the Parkland Library System to council.
Thank you. Councillor Phillips.
So I guess the question I have of my fellow councillors, I guess, I sit on this board, so I'm very familiar on how the Parkland Library Board system works, the Library Act through the provincial government, how Parkland and our own municipal library interacts and the benefits. But for the information of the rest of council, is this something that you think is needed? I know when I became a part of this committee, I was, the information given was fast and furious, and a lot of stuff I just didn't realize until I was actually on this committee.
Councillor Auld.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I would be in favor of this. I know Councillor Phillips, he can bring his reports back and give his version of how the meetings are and what direction they're going in, but I'm always in favor of having delegations come to council so the public is aware of what we do and why we do it, so I would be in favor of this for sure.
Thank you. Anybody else? No, there's two alternatives for the delegation. One is just on the structure and role of Parkland with its emphasis on how it benefits your community. The other one is more an orientation. I like the idea too. Personally, I would prefer the orientation just to give me the nuts and bolts of how it all works together. But if anybody else has any other ideas, I'd like to hear them too. Councillor Hutchinson.
Thanks. I would agree. I think the orientation would be a more fitting presentation for us.
Thank you. So can I get a motion on this?
I will make a motion that administration instruct administration to request Parkland Regional Library Board system to present to council in the future.
Thank you very much. If there's no further discussion, I will call that to a vote. All in favor? And that's carried. And that's it for correspondence. For action, the next section is 9, correspondence for information. 9.1, Special Olympics Alberta Winter Games 2027 Winter Games bid. Who would like to address this? Thank you. Councillor Hutchinson.
I would love to address this. I would love to be able to put something together for this, but after reviewing their package, it's it's quite an extensive games. And I just don't think a winter games bid would fit very well in our community, unfortunately, because I think it's important to grab these opportunities whenever they come in front of us, but I just don't feel this one fits. So, having said that, I would just put forward the motion to accept 9.1 for information.
Thank you very much. Any, Councillor Phillips?
Oh.
No? Okay, if there's no further discussion, I'll call this to a vote. All in favor? And that's carried. On to our action list, the last item here, 10.1. Mr. Kraus.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So going through the open items on the auction list. So the first one is the discussions with the county on various buildings and the medical clinic, and that was to go to ICC, and that meeting is set for this Thursday. So that's in progress. The Youth Advisory Council, that's being discussed at service level, so that's still open. For the MPC, the public hearing is set for October 1st and for council's consideration at that meeting. The airport terminal building, the assessment on the foundation is complete. We're just waiting for the report, but it looks favorable or sounds favorable. Again, the next one is in regards to the landmark project, and that's going to service level in discussion with historic site. And the federal complement discussion, the staff sergeant advised me yesterday she has the report requested on allocation of resources, and I'm expecting her to forward that to me today, which then I can draft the report for council for what would be our best course of action in increasing the federal side of the complement. And that is it, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Mr. Kraus regarding the action list, action item list? If there are none, I'll make a motion that we accept the action list for information. All in favor? And that's carried. I'd like to take a break. Oh. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Agenda item 11, administrative inquiries. Are there any? None. Oh, Councillor Auld.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I would just like to inquire, now that we've had the open house with McNutt, are we bringing that back to a council meeting to discuss, or is that a notice of motion that needs to bring that back?
Mr. Kraus.
Actually, I'm looking for council's direction on that and for a discussion of where council wants to proceed from here.
Thank you.
Are we discussing this now, or are we?
I-
I'm not sure.
Yeah,
It was going to be part of the council CAO dialogue, actually, is where I
Oh,
was
okay,
going to
perfect.
to discuss it.
thank you. Are there any other administrative inquiries? None, then moving on to agenda 12, any notices of motion? And there are none. I'd like to take a break. How do I do that? I just call a break?
Yeah.
Okay, taking a break. 50. Welcome back. We are going to move into closed session, so if I can get a motion. Counselor Auld,
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll make the motion that we move into closed session.
thank you. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, welcome back to the regular council meeting for September 17th, 2024. We have a couple of motions.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll make a motion to accept item 13.2 as information.
Okay, and if there's no discussion, are we going to do the second one? All in favor? Carried. And the next one, Councillor Alt?
I'll make the motion that we accept the CAO dialogue as information.
Thank you. All in favor? Carried. And that concludes our meeting. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks,
Okay, nobody died, Ken.